Welcome to our Digging Deeper podcast, the midweek podcast here at River Valley Church, where we like to go deeper into the teaching of the previous weekend. And I'm Mark, one of our pastors here, and it's my privilege to facilitate this time today. And I brought in a couple of friends who have agreed to join me today. This is Edward Durham, Edward, you've been in Grants Pass how many years now?
Since 1979.
Whoa, that's a long time.
I'm almost a Grants Passer.
Oh yeah, that's longer than me even.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
and that's wow. So
But I've escaped.
and you are an entrepreneur, you're a small business owner and member of the church here, and
Yes, indeed.
a couple of ministries that you are involved with here.
I work in media as well as the worship. I don't do as much in the worship as I'd like, but
Yeah,
they've asked me to sing again.
nice.
So I may
Nice.
sing in a season coming.
That's one thing they've never asked me.
Oh, really? Well,
Yeah. Well, and so yeah, you've probably seen Edward back there at the Sound Council before the services, and appreciate all. And you're part of a life group. And
yes,
heard
yes.
good stuff about that. So thank you for joining me today, Jim Hamilton, a good friend. And Jim, you've been here in the community how many years?
Oh, we did a couple trips here when I was in elementary school. We lived here in the mid '70s, and then we moved back to California with my family because of some family emergencies, and then we came back up in about 85-ish.
Okay.
So I've been here ever since 84, 85, somewhere around there. Been
All
here
right.
since then.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you are a police officer,
Yes.
and not just any police officer, the deputy police chief here of the Department of Public Safety, and a follower of Jesus.
Yeah.
And we are. Well, I mentioned in the message a life group that Dana and I helped start, and that was with Jim and his wife Misty,
Oh,
who now lead this life group for law enforcement and spouses, and
We actually have other members, court staff. We have a firefighter and his wife who.
you
are
let
also
in a
involved.
firefighter.
I did. He's
Wow.
a friend of mine, and he worked at our department. He's moved to another agency, but he was on the SWAT team with me, so
Okay.
he's kind of part of the brotherhood. So
Kind of
yeah, we let him.
brotherhood,
Yeah.
Awesome. And so if you heard the message last week, you probably can figure out why my two friends are here, and that they actually agreed to join me in this conversation. And I just a clarification: Jim is here not as a representative of the Department of Public Safety, although I know you're not afraid to talk about your role,
Right.
as a police officer.
Yeah.
And just thank you so much, you guys, for being here and participating in this important conversation based on what we're experiencing in our nation right
Yes,
now.
sir. Right.
I mean, just to give you kind of a quick review, I taught, and all of our teachers taught on the topic of racial tension, and my title was The Kingdom of Reconciliation. And what does Jesus have to say about dealing with racial tension and unity? And so we dove into that. It's such a long and big conversation. I was thinking that this would be a real positive time to bring in you guys who, obviously kind of represent unfortunately, you represent the kind of the ends of the debate and the tension. You really don't know each other that well. You've been getting to know each other well here in some of our previous conversations about this. You've seen each other at church, but it's not like you've been in life group together. You are just sort of appreciating a new friendship that you guys have together. So all that to say, again, thank you for joining me here for this conversation. And a couple points that I tried to make is that, Jesus people are reconcilers across the board, right? And I think the other thing that we tried to make a big point about is that Christians should be able to say more than one thing in this conversation. That's where we get into problems, because our culture says it's got to be either or. You got to say this or you got to say this. You can't say both. And that doesn't make a lot of sense. And it's also, it's not what Jesus is about, right? Jesus is somebody who could say more than one thing, because we don't follow the allegiance to any group. Our allegiance is to Jesus.
Amen.
Right? So I think that's important. And there was another way, I didn't say this, but there's another way of looking at this, that it's not just that we can say more than one thing, it's that we should be upset by more than one thing. Right? I mean, we should be outraged, for example, not just that cities are on fire and violence. We should be outraged that there's not racial equality that there should be in this country. We should be outraged about what happened to George Floyd. We should be out. So there, I guess what I'm arguing for is to ask ourselves a serious question. What really makes us upset? Because I think sometimes we make the most noise about what we're most upset about. And I guess that's okay, but how come we're not more upset about like other things? And of course, when I say upset, I'm talking about a righteous kind of a anger that actually does something productive, about the problem. So, and then another thing that we talked about quickly was that we shouldn't divide over secondary issues. That a lot of this conversation does get into different opinions. It's complex, it's not unimportant, but different opinions about how we got here, what needs to be done to improve. And, we might all have strong opinions about that, but that's basically all they are. Like, it's hard to really know what the best answers are, for some of these things. I used the example quickly about the protests here, and we'll talk about that here in just a few minutes. I want to get your input on those. But the protests that took place here a couple weeks ago, and how some Christians participated, but other Christians felt like it wasn't appropriate for them to participate. And I try to make the point that if you talk to both those people, they have very valid points as to why they did or why they didn't. I do think it's worth pointing out, and someone shared this with me earlier today, that if you chose not to participate because of certain things you don't agree with, signs, everything that Black Lives Matter stands for, violence, whatever the thing is you might not agree with. Not that there was violence, but the potential for violence, here at least. So you pretty much have to say, well, I don't agree with these certain things. If you're going to be part of the protest, I don't agree with these certain things, as I'm standing with, this group of people, whatever, okay, this situation. But we have to do that all the time. If you, like we were talking earlier, if you support a particular politician, you have to disagree at some point with something let's just take Trump, for example. Like, if you're a Trump supporter, especially if you're a Christian, there's going to be some things that you don't agree with in what he says and does. And I'm not trying to make a political statement here. I'm just trying to be a realist. If you vote for Joe Biden coming up in the next election, there's going to be some things that you don't agree with, either in his character or policies or both. All that to say is that we choose what we're going to sort of set aside if we're going to stand for a particular issue. I'm not trying to argue one way or the other, only for some consistency and some tolerance in how we see other Christians practicing all of this. So, and finally, and then I'm going to shut up so I can listen. Okay, but finally, we want to be great listeners. And that's really why I asked you guys to come, to listen to each other, and for all of us as viewers to listen to your stories, because you two represent groups of people for different reasons, and I'm not trying to say at the same level, but you represent groups that are really hurting right now, really in a lot of pain, and under a lot of stress, and kind of the biggest target, or the talking points right now, what's happening. So I think it's really good that we step into other people's reality and try to understand. I appreciate all the feedback I got, a lot of emails, mostly comments, not so many questions, but just comments on how you feel about things. I appreciate all that, and I think that some of the things you brought up will come up here today. So let me just start out with some questions, and we'll just kind of treat this as sort of an open dialogue here. And we'll start with you, Edward. And and you and I have had some talks about this, and I think it'd be good just to share some of your experience with racism and how you've been treated differently because of the color of your skin.
It's so it's hard to do that. I'm going to say off the cuff, because as I was trying to pray through it, I just found myself crying a lot. It's just really, it's hard to admit, first of all, that someone would dislike me because of what I look like. Sometimes it's hard to come to grips with that. But you got to put your pants on, you got to get out there. And so sometimes during the day, I got to steel myself from how I feel. How do I feel? How did that encounter at this store or that lumber yard make me feel? And I have to say, well, I'm not here for feelings, I'm here for lumber. So let me get my lumber and go. But sometimes it's very overwhelming. I try to write some things down, and one of the things that I wrote down is that every morning I wake up as an African American. You know, I know that by lunchtime there will be someone who will cross my path who will give me the what for no reason whatsoever. Whether he's in his truck, or he's standing on the sidewalk, or he's taking my money at the home goods store. And then there are other days where I laugh at this and I don't really notice that I'm African American because nobody points it out. It's all, hey Edward, how you doing? Good to see you. How's your mother? I end up home. I look at the dog. The dog looks at me and I'm like, it's almost like I wasn't black today. Very interesting how that'll happen. So, and again, it's not something that happens every day, but more often than not, even when I'm on church campuses, I will come across an individual who will be hostile towards me because of what I represent in his mind. And occasionally, if I'm really in that mood, I'll say, "Excuse me, why are you that way?" And they say, "What are you talking about? Did I say something?" But you don't want to fight. That's the thing that you don't want to do, especially with a Christian brother. But mostly it just hurts. I just have to say, mostly it's not offensive. It just hurts. It's like somebody is hitting you with a baseball over and over, and you thought you were at a volleyball game.
Yeah.
You're like just wondering, why do I have to feel this way? I say this because most of the people in the church know me, and if they know me, they've heard me say crazy things before. Sometimes I just leave town. I'll go to San Francisco, I'll go to Seattle, just to not feel like the other, just to sort of blend in. I'm just some dude walking down the street. Nobody notices me because there's 100,000s of me. I'm just another face in the crowd. And then I come home and I put my uniform back on, and I try to be the friendly black man, so that people won't react to what I look like. They'll react to who I am as a person. So it's a tough question to answer, and keep your composure at the same time. When you asked me the first time, I had to admit I never thought about it.
Yeah.
It's not something you want to think about, because if you think about it, you might react. And that's not going to help me. I used to be reactionary towards it, but there were consequences. You know, the funny thing, I don't know if you watch Cops or not. No. But the funny thing that happens on that show occasionally is, here's a young man or a woman, and they're giving it to the officer. They are just, and he's standing there, you know, oh, yes, sir, that's true, but could you please just give me your license and registration, get back in the car. And you think, why can't that happen to me? Not that I would want to mouth off, because the outcome might not be the same. But why can't that happen? Why don't I have the right to be indignant? Man, so.
Well, man, I just want to say I'm sorry.
But,
Jim, I mean, as you think about just that, hearing that, that's kind of hard to hear, isn't it, Jim? I mean, I can't relate to that. I mean, the closest I can relate is that someone's looking at me at the store and they got offended because of what I said at a funeral, preaching the gospel. You know what I mean? And that's about as close as I can get. You know, that there are people that just don't like me because of Jesus. But to have to bear what you bear on a daily basis, I'm just so sorry, man.
I live in a Christian community.
Yeah.
Many people are very loving, incredibly kind, and I see those people every day too. So, and like I said, some days I get back in the bed and I have to shake my head and go, wow,
Yeah.
wow, what a great day that was. What a great day that was.
Yeah. Yeah. Any thoughts that provokes in you, Jim, as far as when you hear a guy like Edward share this?
You know, it's offensive to hear that, because I don't. I guess the hard part is that I don't believe that in myself. I would never find myself doing that. But to hear that goes on in this community is one of those things that you shake your head at.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm a note taker, so I was writing notes as you're talking, and the funny thing is you're talking about that you can't go to certain places. You know, I get, and a lot of officers have this, is I can't go to certain restaurants because of what I wear. It's not because of my color like you, so I can't say it's racism, but it's because of my profession. So I'm judged based on my badge, you know, and that's because we'll have family come in or friends like, hey, we want to go here. Yeah, I can't go there. Why not? Yeah, we arrested the cook, and he'll spit in my food. You know, I can go to a store and see people that I arrested, and if I'm with my family, I have to move my family away. We have safety protocols in place. If somebody ever confronts me, you do this, you leave, because your safety is more important than mine. I'll take care of the issue, you know. And so it's not racism. Please don't think that I'm trying to say that it's based on the color, but to some extent, you know, we deal with the same things.
It is
because
very simple.
I'm called out for what I do. I drive down the road and I get pig, suey, other words. You know, we call it the wave. You know, it's not with all the fingers. You know, and I'm like, really? What did I do? Do you know me? It's kind of like you. You know, if I don't know you, how can I judge you?
Right.
You know, and you get the same thing, and it's like, what did I do to you? You know.
Yeah.
But yet, if they screamed, I need help, everybody that I work with, we're going to anchor the brakes and we're going to jump out and be right there, just like you would. If somebody said something to you and offended you, but if they said, please help me, you're the kind of guy that's going to drop what you do to help them. You know, and that's the part that I can't comprehend in a human being. And I would hope that wouldn't happen with Christians.
Right. Yeah. Well, such a tragedy took place here a couple weeks ago with George Floyd, and you know, that's what really triggered all of this. Or as one person said it, I don't know if you like this way of putting it, I don't even know if I agree with it, but one way of putting it is that a Band-Aid was ripped off. We're healing, there's been the attempt at healing of racial tension over the years, and obviously this was just horrific.
A little over the top this time.
I mean, I guess I'd like to maybe get your perspective. Not that we have to talk too much about that video or whatever, but I'll start with you, Jim. You know, as you saw what happened in that video, and then you know you're in a leadership position with your officers, and what did that do to you?
Yeah, you know, it was one of those that you watch it and you shake your head and you go, why? You know, how can you do that? I mean, it goes against all the tactics that we train within our agency. And it goes against everything that we teach from basic all the way up to advanced. And it goes against what the golden rule, you know, treat others as you would want to be treated. And when you have that situation, you watch what happened. You know, the guy's detained, he's in custody, and regardless of whether or not he's still trying to fight, there's ways of securing an individual safely without compromising their well-being. And you know, I watched it and I was just like, man, there's no justification for that. I can't see how you could possibly justify that. You know, and there's several parts of it that you just look at and you just shake your head. And I always look at things to say, okay, if this happens, what can you learn from it? And you know, how do you prevent it in the future? and you see trigger after trigger after trigger that was missed, that it was preventable, on several levels, and yeah, it was just one of those you look at, you just, for me, I just shook my head and just was like, wow.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Edward, what?
I'm with Jim. I mean, let's divorce ourselves from the fact that we are who we are, and let's just look at it from that perspective. A man took another man's life in a and I hate to use the word heinous, but in sort of a heinous way, and he didn't seem to be bothered by it.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't seem to bother him.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever comes out of that, the fact of the matter is he believed that he had the right to take this man's life and that there wouldn't be any consequences. And that's the part that's chilling for me. Mm-hmm. The conversation I shared with Jim earlier about how every once in a while I'll get stopped locally. I wouldn't try that on a cop in LA. That's not what I would do. When I get pulled over in California, I am out of the car laying on the ground praying that this guy be a human being.
Mm-hmm.
And fortunately, I don't get stopped a lot in California, but fortunately, this experience is not something I've ever witnessed.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked with, for, and around a lot of people in law enforcement. I have some law enforcement people in my family. But black men being brutally murdered is not something that's new. It's just, it's very commonplace. It's almost like when they change the shows every fall. Oh, it's a new TV show. It's a new black guy got killed. This time, it was the look on the man's face when he killed him, and you could see the man, first his bladder went, then his mouth fell open. You could see the man was dying right in front of you. That begs the question, what are you going to do about it? Mm-hmm. It was if he was saying, what are you going to do about it? Mm-hmm. Well, so if everybody was watching, they decided what they were going to do was they were going to come out and protest. Now, anytime you have protesters, you have counter-protesters. Anytime you have that kind of volatility in the street, something's going to happen. I don't know what they call it. Adrenaline heightens. Somebody yells something, somebody yells something, somebody yells something, and you forget why you're protesting. Because, as I said earlier, everything that you've suppressed that day, that week, that month, your entire life, comes out of you. Mm-hmm. It comes out of you. And you want to, forgive me for saying this, you want to find the officer and you want to just show him how you really feel, but he's not available. Mm-hmm. So what do? I don't know. I've seen riots, never participated in one, so I don't know what you do. I don't know what turns a person violent when they're in a peaceful protest. I don't.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about the protest here for just a couple minutes and some of your feelings about them. You've already kind of started the conversation, Edward. Maybe just talk about our own town. Jim, I know that you were there walking around, and what was your perspective of the protest? I think, Edward, you drove by, if I understand right.
I saw Jim. I was like, hey, there's Jim.
you thought it was you didn't even know what it was for until you saw the signs, right?
It's not unusual that people protest in front of the courthouse.
Yeah.
So I thought potentially I missed a flyer. I had no idea what it was.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I got down the street and my daughter had texted me, and she showed me a sign of her and her friend and their signs, and I wrote her, oh, that's very cute. I'm still not really comprehending what I saw. What I did see that I did recognize, though, was that on the right side of the street in front of the courthouse were some peaceful protesters waving signs, lots of law enforcement, and on the left side of the street seemed to be a group of very angry people. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't understand initially, because I know what the protest was, I couldn't understand initially why there was that disconnect. Who are the angry people? Who are the people who are protesting? What are they protesting about? Mm-hmm. Then when she texted me, then it clicked. Mm-hmm. I'm not dismissing Mr. Floyd's death in any way, but on that morning I woke up as an African American man as well, so I had to go about what I needed to go about, and I never think to protest. Mm-hmm. I never think to protest. God forbid. I decided I wanted to protest. And what do I do if something were to happen to me? How do I?
Mm-hmm.
For my generation, it's a little bit different. I think we've seen a lot of protests come and go. We've seen a lot of leaders killed. Nothing ever changes. But this was different because of the makeup of the people. It was really all over the country, all over the world. It's different. This rage has nothing to do with Mr. Floyd anymore. This rage just happens to be about inequality and the misuse. I think it's the misuse of the police. I think it's the police should not be sent to disperse peaceful protesters. That makes them a target. I don't understand. That didn't come the fluidity in my whole brain until they sent the National Guard into D.C. I thought, you need the Army for a bunch of old ladies who are standing out there with signs? I'm baffled. But that goes back to what are we protesting for in the first place? We're upset. Why are we upset? Because it's not fair. It's unequal. And why do we choose to demonize either the African Americans or the police? Is because there's a fear, and that fear is based upon a systemic desire to have someone to blame. There has to be someone to blame. And I don't understand why we're blaming anybody other than the guy that killed Mr. Floyd. Let's focus on that guy. That guy's responsible. That ends the story. Now, the looters who stole the sneakers, let's arrest them. Let's put them in prison. But the people who are on the sidewalk praying, let's listen to what they're praying about. Maybe they're praying about something that actually will help us to better understand why why do they feel so disenfranchised? I mean, I've always asked that question to anyone in my family who was in law enforcement. Help me to understand. They want you to go and break up so I was born at a time and lived in a city where they had forced busing. I actually had to leave the city because I played hockey on a hockey team. And everybody I knew was white except for me. I was the only black guy. And then I went to school one day and everybody on my hockey team was throwing rocks at buses full of black people. And I was like, bro, what are you doing? They're like, they're black people trying to come to school. We're not talking about you. We're talking about them. Focus. And I'm like, so I had to go home and ask that question. Help me out. I was just at school, and all my friends on the hockey team were throwing rocks at the school bus full of black people that they were bringing into the school. How does that make any sense to me? And my father shared wisdom. My father was very good at sharing wisdom. And he said, well, you're going to have to choose. Again, there's another opportunity for you to choose. Your friends or your people. I was 14? I don't even understand the term people. What does that mean? I'm sorry. I'm not yet ready to fight for the color of my skin because I just want to play hockey. But I can't, no way I can go back to school, but I did. And we did have a practice, and it was ugly. But it was an eye-opener. I never expected to see that. That's not something I ever expected to see.
Wow.
I mean, you've eaten in my home. You've ridden in the car with me. We've gone to the movies together.
Wow.
And here you are, up in arms.
Yeah. Jim, how about your perspective of the protest here and maybe positives in your opinion, negatives, or what?
You know, I was surprised. I have a little different perception of it because I worked both sides of the street. You know, one of the things that we did was we went in and we said, listen, we're Swiss. We're here to be neutral. We're not picking sides. We're just here to make sure that nothing bad happens. We contacted the organizers on both sides of the street. We went around, we talked to as many people as we could, shook hands, bumped fists, bumped elbows, you know, whatever it took. And I was, in talking to people, surprised at how much common ground there was. Because
Really?
both sides of the street were seeing a lot of the exact same things and they were in agreement on a lot of issues. The difference, I think, between the two, which in answer to your question, I think that was the positive, was that I walked away gone, you know, they're really, they may be on opposite sides of the street, but they're really both here for the same reasons, you know, and they really were. The difference, I think, was the concern and the misinformation that was going out through social media and that's been pushed through the press of, they're going to come in and they're going to riot and loot and destroy your town. And so the locals, they were there saying, hey, look, we don't disagree with what they're saying about this event and how it went down and everything, but we're not going to let them destroy our town. Some of that I was like, I get that because it's my town too.
Mm-hmm.
Lived here for a long time. I don't want people to come into town, and especially, some of them that were there, they were not from here. And it was very clear what their purpose was from where I was standing, because the people that were there for the right reasons came up, they thanked us, they talked to us. I spent 20 minutes talking to two ladies that were there that we had a great conversation. And it ended with thank you and thank you, because we both got to the point where, they were holding signs and talking about stuff. And by the time we got done talking it through, they were like, wow, I'm glad we talked to you. I mean, one of them sent an email to my boss just saying, hey, I had a great conversation. I'd like to sit down and have a cup of coffee with him to talk further, and that was really what I took away from it, was that the majority of the people were there for the right reasons. There was a group of people that were there for not the right reasons. They were looking for a fight. No doubt about it. No doubt about it. And we did our best to make sure that didn't happen, because then, much like those two ladies I talked to said, they're like, those people aren't with us. And our conversation went to, yeah, but they're here making you guys look bad. And they're like, we know, that's why we're leaving. But even though you leave, they're going to make you look bad because they're not here for the right reasons. And they're like, right, they're not even from around here. Right. They're not trying to help our community or help the cause or really they're there for one reason. This is an opportunity for them to go out and try to cause some chaos. And unfortunately, I think the people that were there didn't allow that to happen. And fortunately, the people that were counter-protesting didn't want it to happen, and they didn't let it happen. And we were able to intervene on a couple of them that were getting close. There was some heated times that we were like, oh, it's just one spark away from this powder cake going, and we not that we prevented it, I think cooler heads prevented it on both sides. And that's where my perception was a little different than yours. But the takeaway was that it ended. I think with a lot of people, even the two ladies that I talked to, they went across the street and talked to the other group, and they're like, we were kind of surprised that they really agreed with us on a lot of these things. Yeah, I was kind of like working the crowd to see.
Some of it probably optics, right? A guy standing there with an AK, it's not necessarily the optics that the people on this side of the street want to see.
Right.
And then someone talked to that person and said, well, I'm actually concerned about this town too.
Right.
And I've heard of a certain element that might be here. So again, I did talk to a lot of people, so I don't know, but it just seems like it's interesting to have conversations. And I've heard about people crossing the other side of the street, having a conversation, not necessarily agreeing on everything, but at least understanding.
Right.
I mean, how can you go wrong with that?
Right.
Let me understand you first, even if I end up, like you can even hate me, but if I understand you, I want to love you, I want to listen to you, and there's a lot of common. Often there's a lot of common there. Not, of course, not always. Edward, I heard you recently make a statement. We were talking, and you said, you know what? I don't want special treatment. I want equal treatment. And that really kind of resonated with me. Maybe you can unpack that just for a couple minutes.
Short answer is Christ provides everything that we all get to enjoy in our lives. And in the absence of Christ, there isn't very much enjoyment in our lives. For me, my experience has been, and Jim shared a story that actually mirrored exactly my own life. If you come from any circumstance, you can make a life for yourself if you're willing to punch the right clock. Starts with getting out of bed and going to work. Then you have to follow through and you have to do a good job. And then you have to seek out opportunity to do an even better job. I'm sometimes misclassified. I mean, I know I'm here representing people who look like me, but I wasn't raised to be black. I was raised to be an African American, just an American who happened to be a descendant from somebody who came from Africa, and that was the end of the story. I struggle with the notion that there is a program that's going to lead me or anyone who looks like me to the promised land. I struggle with that. Yes, if I get a job at UPS, I'll make $20 an hour, I'll have health insurance, I may be able to say, or to send my kids to school. Or I could sit at home and say, UPS would never hire me. So, damn the man. That kind of doesn't make any sense. Going through that question, I again did some research online. I wanted to know how many non-white governors were there in America. And I was shocked at the numbers, like 14 or 15, and I couldn't fight. I had to read, I had to go back and Wikipedia the thing. Now, when I think of individuals who have also achieved great lives for themselves, Colin Powell comes to mind, Al Roker comes to mind, I don't know why, but Al Roker comes to mind.
Oh, heck yeah.
There are individuals who have just said to themselves, here's what I really want to do. I want to be the best man or woman that I can possibly be, and I'm not going to let the color of my skin or my circumstances affect me. Mm-hmm. Now, does everyone achieve the goal they set out for themselves? I say to my own sons, reach for the moon, be happy if you make it to Cleveland. And saying that, what I'm saying is that you're not always going to get what you want, but you're going to get more than you're going to get if you don't try. So the conversation is sometimes people who are marginalized need help. I don't think they need help, they just need the opportunity. Have I ever been denied a job because I was black? Absolutely. I'm overqualified for a lot of stuff, and the guy was hired who wasn't qualified at all. Nepotism. I mean, I've been in unions where I couldn't get as many hours as another guy. But do I cry or fall apart on that? No, I go to the boss and I say, look, you're a really nice guy, but you're a bum. And I'm going to go to work across the street, and you're going to watch me do good over there. And I love to come back and go, hey, Mark, how's it going? How's that new guy you hired? Is he working out for you? And people have offered to hire, oh man, no, I don't want to come back, because there's no coming back from the fact that you wouldn't give me an opportunity. But here I hopefully have demonstrated to you that the next guy comes through the door, you might want to give him a shake. I mean, do some people need help? Yes, but it doesn't have to be special treatment. It just has to be an open door. Mm-hmm. That's all. Some doors are closed for whatever reason, and we call them gatekeepers. Every once in a while, you just have to call the gatekeeper out. Might not help you, but it might help the next guy. Next guy might get that promotion. He might get that job opportunity. But if you cower in fear, that's what people want you to do. They want you to be afraid. Then you're never going to achieve anything. I mean, you coach kids.
Sure. I
mean, when you're coaching a kid and you see that kid who's just not going to make it, do you say that kid's not going to make it, or do you coach him harder?
It's called encouragement.
Amen.
Right? I mean, it's a core scriptural truth. People of all color have these struggles and weaknesses and limitations and a couple strikes against them, and I affirm that the black community has some serious challenges, right? It's only been, someone reminded me recently, it's only been 3 generations that people owned people. 3 generations,
Yeah.
like it's not that long ago,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So there's some challenges. Somebody says there's no racism. What planet are you living on? And we don't have time to go into like all of the proof and the challenges. I love your heart, Edward, because you're like, hey, you know what? You can still stick out if you work hard, show up, and keep knocking on doors, and continue to do your best. And that's
Can I tell a funny story?
Yeah.
So most people who know me don't know this part about me. So I used to come into this room, and I used to walk down this hallway. And this hallway was, I don't forget what color it was, but it was a really weird color.
Yeah.
So I said one day to Michael, the worship pastor here, excuse me, can I paint that hallway? And he said, why? I said, because I'm just tired of looking at it. 6 months later, I want to say I was on the maintenance team here at the church. Now, I didn't come here to get a job. I came here to be with a friend. but I filled a need. Someone noticed my opportunity to work, and they said, "Hey, would you like?" I forget what I did next. I think I remodeled a bathroom. Would you like to remodel a bathroom? I was like, "Sure, I'll remodel a bathroom." And then one day somebody gave me a check. Like, "We really want to give you a check," and I thought, well, that'll probably ruin it. I don't really want to get paid. I just I want to serve. I see you have a need. Maybe you just didn't have a guy to do it. I just wanted to do it. And I had a lot of fun in that hallway. Many people would walk by me and they'd go, why? I just want to ask you a quick question. Why are you painting that hallway? I said, do you see what this hallway looks like? And they were like, yes, this hallway's been like this for 20 years. I said, well, somebody has to step up. Somebody has to step up. Right. I mean, that's just my philosophy. Yeah. That's just my philosophy.
Jim, we had talked about, there's this phrase that's being used quite a bit, police brutality. And I even used that in my message. Because we're good enough friends, you said that you actually bristled a couple times when I used that phrase. Right. What does that do to you? How would you maybe want to comment about that phrase and how the feelings that as you guys get attacked the way that you are?
Yeah. You know, I think it's when I was listening to the message, it was one of those that kind of hit a nerve. And I'm like, the term, the way that it's being used is that it's this issue across law enforcement, and that's just not the case. There's two things. There's number one, it's what you said earlier. It's that individual that did wrong, and is it embarrassing? And am I ashamed that guy was wearing a badge? Absolutely. That's the first thing that you get taught. I would hope that every agency teaches this, and my first FTO says, whatever you do, never tarnish the badge. Because you hit everybody when you do it. And that's stuck with me for my career. It's a couple of things you don't do. Number one, you don't lie, and number two, you don't do anything to tarnish the badge, because you affect every officer that pins that thing on. And so when I hear that, it kind of gets me, because I know that that's not what I see and what I've seen in my career, almost coming up on 30 years of doing it. And is use of force ugly? It is. It really is. There's one of the guys that retired, his favorite line was, listen, everybody loves hot dogs, but nobody wants to see how they're made, because it'll turn you off on them, and it's kind of the same thing is, when we get called, we're not always dealing with people at their best. And when you got people that are willing to fight, and some of them will go to the end. I mean, that's how officers get killed as well, is you got people that are altered mental states, and they've got drugs on board and all these things, and you can't just go up and hold on to them and make it all better. It's sometimes it's ugly,
or just let them go.
Right. Yeah.
They're going to hurt other people.
Right. That's the other piece is, it's sometimes like, well, why don't you just let them go? Do you want them showing up in your neighborhood? Do you want them knocking on your mom's door? Because I don't. And that's what we're put into those situations, and sometimes it's a no-win. So the police brutality piece, what I had a hard time with was that it sounds like it's everywhere.
You're black now.
Right. Yeah. Yes, sir. Yeah, I feel your pain. Yeah. Right. And that's really what it is. And I'm like, that's just not the case. And some of the signs. There's an ACAB. All cops are bastards. And I'm like, and the girl that's holding it, I kind of walked by and I kind of looked and did one, and she goes, well, not you guys. You guys are okay. And I'm like, this is all, and I've got the same stuff on that's there. So is it all or is it not? But which is what you say, is it all or is it some? And if it's some, I'm okay with saying that, hey, that guy was wrong. If you want to call that guy out, that guy was wrong. And if somebody else did something wrong, then absolutely call him out. I mean, we weed out the bad ones as much as we can. Are there bad officers? Yeah. Yeah. There's bad clergy. There's I mean, let's go through the list of the different professions that you hold in high esteem, where you say there are bad people that make it into that, and it doesn't matter their color, they're just bad people.
Yeah, and just a thought here, and thank you, Jim, so much for sharing that and sharing your heart on that. Bad apples in every profession, but isn't it true that professions with more authority or more perceived authority, and you mentioned clergy, and there's a perceived authority,
right?
And those are actually, I think, they're probably more felt because of the position. the power that goes with it,
Right.
the media that kind of goes with it as well. Not to get into a media conversation, but they do tend to talk about certain things, maybe more than other things.
Right.
And so again, that's not to minimize that it's out there. It's out there.
Right.
And I surely didn't mean that it's a widespread issue. And I was using the term on a minority level.
Right.
But and I appreciate what you were saying, Edward, about those individual cases. We just got to go after that, man. And you know, justice for George Floyd is exactly what's happening.
Sure.
Right? I mean,
Yeah.
and I can't predict exactly how the trial and everything's going to go, but I think we all know justice for George Floyd is happening. And it's interesting how it is sort of fueling a greater conversation. Like we could, you know, I could disagree maybe with a lot of the ways that people are going about things and over the top. But man, more people are talking. I'm more sensitive to the issue. Here we are having this conversation. We weren't having this conversation a month ago. You know, my bad. You know, that it takes stuff like this to actually go more serious. Hey, Edward, what's really going on in your life? You know, how does it really feel? So you know, in that respect, I think that we could see some positives in all this. You know.
Yeah, hopefully it lasts. That would
Yeah.
be the key. And on social media, many people reached out to me. I'm pretty active on social media, and they kept saying that this is another example of police brutality. And I try to make a very strong point that economic brutality for sure, brutality all day had nothing to do with the uniform except that empowered the individual to be able to commit the crime. That's why for me, everybody's different. For me, when two people are having a fight, man and woman in their home, kids running away, mother screaming at the top of her lungs, there should be somebody other than the police that we could call. Sometimes when the police show up, the escalation takes place because somebody wants to show how bad they are. Look at how bad I am. Well, wait a minute. I thought it was a man having a fight with his wife. Well, the police are here, they're pumped up, I got to get pumped up too. And then when it goes south, who do we blame? We forget all about the guy who was beating his wife up. We're now blaming the officer because he created this violent situation. I'm not really sure what the full swatting term means, but it's like the story of the people who call the SWAT and say something really heinous has happened and you better get over there. And then they roll up 50 deep, hundreds of thousands of dollars of manpower, and it's a prank. I mean, sometimes people use the police in the wrong situations, and that's part of the problem. Not the problem that the police are creating, the problem that the situation has created. There should be an alternative to having an armed officer show up at a situation that doesn't require anything. And in this town, praise the Lord, the public service has people who run around in pickup trucks and they flag when there's an accident and they help when the dog's loose or the cat's in the tree so that the officers can be about law and order. And I never saw that till I got here. I was like, who's that guy? You know? And you know, because I asked the wrong person, he said, oh, that's Dudley Do-Right. I said, Dudley Do-Right, what does that mean? He said he's a sworn officer, but he doesn't have a gun. I thought, well, how effective is that guy? And then, because I was at Calvary, so I'm sitting there at Safeway, here's the thief with the beer, here's the public safety guy. You know, you don't need an officer for some things. Some things you do need an officer for. And there was a great public safety guy here for a long time. He retired. Tall fella, super friendly. I'd never met a friendlier officer in my entire life. And I want to say I missed the guy because he was just such a he represented the law, but he did it with dignity and compassion in a way I don't think you noticed that he was a public safety. I don't think you noticed.
Wow.
He was just a great guy. So yes, there's a bad rap to say police brutality.
Yeah.
I've not, except for the situation in D.C. and that wasn't really the police; it was the military.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
I Another issue, and this gets maybe a little more into the technical issues of your job. We had a small chat, and you were helping me understand this whole kind of this controversy of profiling. And you explained the difference between profiling and racial profiling.
Sure.
I think maybe our listeners, maybe it's just me and I'm kind of ignorant, but
Right.
I think our listeners might benefit. What's the
Right.
difference?
Right. So, profiling is usually based on experience and or research, something that's there. If you look back through, the FBI has their BAU, Behavioral Analysis Unit, and their job is to profile people looking for serial killers. We've reached out to a few years ago, had conversations with them about what we believe to be an individual who was going to do a mass shooting or some type of a mass killing. And we were on the phone with them, and they will give you that here's all of the criteria. And so that's profiling. Do we profile? Everybody does. Everybody does. When you're selecting who to rent to, you profile. You look at a criteria, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, you're looking for a profile of an individual who you think you can trust to move into that residence and take care of it and pay you.
Amen.
Right? So you profile. I profile because when I walk down the street or if I'm driving, I'm looking for cars that I think might be DUI. And there is a research that's done to say if you see cars doing this, and this, there is a high likelihood that that individual is intoxicated or something's going on. I want to stop and talk to him. Hey, you okay? Because I know how many DUI drivers kill people, right? So I don't look at what's their race to go, yep, that's my car. I go weaving, speed up and down, unable to maintain, their distance from another vehicle, all of these little triggers, and that tells me, boom, those are all the check marks I need to say that this is an individual I want to talk to. I want to make sure maybe they're just not paying attention, and if that's the case, we're good. I give them their warning, go down the road, please be safe. But we do that. I told you the story when I worked at the grocery store when I was a kid. I could see a guy walking in and somebody walk in and be like, oh yeah, he's going to shoplift. And the majority of the time I was right. We'd run and start watching them, and you'd watch, boom, there they go, they concealed it, let's go get them. And you just get to where you pick it out, and it's not that it's based on anything other than your experience. You see certain things, and then there's people will do the same things.
Right.
And so it's not necessarily that you're racial profiling. You profile through experience and through what you learn and what even studies show of how people act. And we're humans. We tend to follow patterns a lot of times. And that's where, somebody with bad credit who doesn't pay their bills, you're going to look at that profile to say, I can't rent to you because you've flaked out on all these other people, and I'm not going to be the next. And so it's done in I think many different professions and or employment areas, but the tag is, well, you're only stopping me because wait a minute. No, I'm not. Let me explain to you first. And then I'll tell you why I did that. I know my thing is like, if a car is going down the road at 50 miles an hour and they blow the light, I'm looking at the light to see did they make it through the intersection, not what the driver looks like. Right? So if I pull up behind a car and they've got expired tags and I stop them, if they have tinted windows, I can't tell who the driver is. There's a system in place in Oregon that we have to fill out every time that we make a traffic stop, that you go through this criteria and you check the boxes to say, what were they stopped for, how old were they, where were they at, and then it goes into, were you able to identify the race prior to the stop? Sometimes you check yes, the majority of the time it's no. It's very rare that I can say, yeah, I can tell who the driver was. When my wife drives in the car, nobody will be able to see because she's so low, she can't even see her over the steering wheel, so he's just like a little frog head sticking up there, so I'm going to get in trouble for that.
I appreciate you explaining that, because I think sometimes that I'm against profile,
Right.
It doesn't seem to line up with how some people define, their civil liberties or because it can never be 100% accurate, right? Some people might think. And no, I think that's helpful, whereas racial profiling would obviously be stepping over the line, and to whatever degree that's still happening out there with bad apples, that is not appropriate at all. Well, guys, I think we're probably over an hour here, and this has been so helpful for me, and I hope for all of us as listeners. let me do this. I'm going to quickly share short story of my journey, something I've recently learned, and then maybe we can end with just a quick question. As believers, what more can we do as believers to really make a difference? What are some of the helpful maybe answers as we move ahead? But I said in the sermon I was going to share a little bit about my story, and I'll share quickly. So a couple of years ago, I found out that my dad was like a high percentage, at least a fourth, African American. And he never told us. He said he was Native American. He said he was Native American, not African American. And so my mom, my dad's been passed away for about 20 years. My mom basically gave him her word that she would not tell me. Okay, but she finally realized that's ridiculous. And it's good. It'd be good that I know. And there's some other things that happened. One of my kids found some ancestry pictures of my great grandparents, and there's no denying.
Yeah, excuse me. Excuse me. Hold on here.
I have some brothers.
Excuse me.
And that helped my mom kind of like think it through and realize, this needs to be. Mark needs to know about this. My brother has passed away also, so. It helped me learn some things about my father and about why he was the way that he was. That he grew up in rural Michigan in this racially mixed home, and it was so shame-based that they had to hide it. They had to pass as white, and so he carried those demons, those personal demons of self-loathing and racism. All the way to his death. He was a Christian, he knew the Lord, but he never got this issue dealt with. And it was just, and it set me kind of on a journey. I spent some time with his last remaining sibling, Uncle Don, who's 93, spent a whole day, he lives down in Sacramento, spent a whole day with him. He helped fill in some of the blanks, because I'd kind of been cut off from my dad's side of the family, and I realized the reason why is because when I got to a certain age, I would see, hey, how come it doesn't look Native American to me, that kind of a thing. And my dad just cut us off from that. So to spend all that time with Uncle Don and for him to tell me, look, this is what happened, and it's helped me to understand where my dad was at more. It's helped me to hate racism more. It's helped me to realize it's right in my own family, and it had a terrible impact on my father. For me, it's like, I don't care. I mean, this is great. To be a more mixed race than I thought, great, But he sure struggled with that, and it's really helped me, take some right steps and be a little more empathetic.
I think one of the greatest things about being an American is that means you're new. You're new. It's perplexing to me when people say, well, I'm white. And I think, and I ask this question every once in a while, especially in a bar. Well, where do you come from? Oh, Cleveland. I go, well, wait a minute, Cleveland. I've done some research, and there is no section of Cleveland that's full of white people. I mean, like, where's this, or what, the white race and the black race? Right. I'm brown. I'm a skull of this couch, as a matter of fact. And I'm Native, and I'm French, and I'm African, and I'm positive I'm Irish. Only because of one uncle who looks very Irish. And that doesn't dilute the fact that, first of all, God made me the way he wanted me to be. And whether or not I'm pure wasn't the point. The point was that I love him, and that I serve him, and I serve all that he provides me with. It's refreshing in a way to hear that there's a part of your life that you didn't know about, and now you're trying to learn about it.
Yes.
I've read a book recently, maybe about 5 years ago, about a alt-right white supremacist who did a DNA test and discovered he was the least white person he'd ever met, and that was helpful for him because he realized that he really was more of an anti-government person. He was anti-government. He wasn't anti-black or white. His issue was he didn't like how the government was working, but under this umbrella, he found a home.
Yeah.
Until one day his wife said, "You got to get a DNA test to prove how white you are," and he was like, "Ooh,
Interesting.
ooh, yeah." So
Thank you.
thank you.
Last words on just as a Christ follower, how you're challenged to move on from here.
In light of meeting Jim, one of the things that Jim said was, "You had met me before." And that was when the little white house that the church owns across the street, they turned it over to the SWAT team, and I was on the maintenance team at that time. And I remember vividly telling that story. What'd you do today at work? Oh, well, 15 police officers pulled up, and they had a SWAT truck, and they were going to break a window in the building. And they were like, "Really? What was that all about?" I said, in my community, it's so small, everyone kind of works together. We all work together, even at the church level. The church is open to not only having me on staff, but they're hoping to have the police of our community come and use the facilities. And that's what we need more of. We need more of, if I spend more time with the firemen, the postmen, the pastor, the videographers, I will hear their stories. And I will be empowered to now have a better understanding of them. In my line of work, because I have to profile people, I learn a lot about folks. I learn a lot about folks. And I get to speak into a lot of people's lives. And very rarely, but every once in a while, someone will say to me, "What's it like to live here?" And I know exactly what they're saying. And I say, "It's great. It's great." As a matter of fact, I invite my family, and they come and they go, "Sorry for the fact that it's boring. Man, it's really a nice community. It's really a nice community." And it's a nice community because of the Christians. Not knocking non-Christians, just saying that the community is full of really good-hearted, kind Christians. One of the things that happens at our church, which helps me, I'm in a life group, multi-generational. I have very young people, I'm the oldest probably, and I have very old people, and lots of dialogue about how our lives are enriched because of our uniqueness. And there might only be, and I say this tongue in cheek, only one white person in the room because of the racial makeup.
Gotcha.
Because of the racial makeup.
Yeah,
Because people are from so many different parts of the world in my life group. Now they appear white. If you were to see them, you would think, "Oh, that's a white person."
Yeah.
But if you were to ask their history, well, I'm Italian. Well, I'm Portuguese. Well, I'm Polish.
Yeah.
Wow. So for me, and I answer that question as, if we spend more time with Christ, we spend more time in life group, and we spent more time asking.
Awesome.
"Excuse me, sister, what's it like to be a single woman in Grants Pass?"
Yeah.
And can I hear you? And I get that a lot because of the makeup of my family. I'm in a blended family. The young people come to my house and they say all sorts of stuff. They say and they ask all sorts of really good questions.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the key. Will this be the last time a black man is killed in America? No. I think 4 or 5 have died since Mr. Floyd gave his life. But the change that's happening because of the people coming out and saying, "I'm just not for that anymore. I'm just not going to turn a blind eye to that. I am going to call that out. That's wrong." Not that the brother in the uniform is wrong, but what that guy did was wrong, and we should punish him. I've never seen so many police officers lose their jobs. I mean, it just like when they started testing baseball players, I felt the same way. It's a game. It's a sport. Why do we have to drug? And if we find somebody who's drugging, can we toss them out? And they started to do that, and the game is better than it's ever been. Why can't we do that in anything? In clergy, I mean, if you were driving a Rolls Royce and you had 4 or 5 mink coats, I'm sure we'd run you right out of town. I mean, why can't every profession be treated with the same respect and accountability?
Well said. Well said. Jim, any final words as a Christ follower and how to move on from here?
Yeah, you brought that up, and I thought about it a lot ever since we actually talked to you. You invited me to do this because I struggled as to whether or not to do it. There's a risk involved because somebody can hear what I say and take it the wrong way. And you said it. I'm here to represent who I am as part of this church, and I just happen to be an officer, so I have a different perspective on it. But the one thing that kind of hit me this morning, and thinking a lot about this, and really going, hey, where do I need to go with this, and talking and trying to get some guidance. All of a sudden I pulled myself away from the protests and everything that's going on, and I said, what is that root that's there? And it's hatred. It's anger, and whatever the cause is that's doing it, there's nothing in the book that says it's okay. And so the term that popped in my head, and this is how goofy I am, is don't be a hater. Why can't we go back to don't be a hater? Let's go back to being what the word says, and that is you talk about a lot. Just love on them. So when the people are out there, and if they're saying things, it goes for both sides of the street though. Don't be a hater for either side. Let's do what you said. I want to know your story, because when you find out the story, then you know the individual, and you can truly understand where they're coming from and what they deal with. And I think that's what hit me as I was going through this and trying to sort it out, is detach yourself from that and look at it from maybe a different perspective and try to see what's going on, and then go,
Is the root hatred?
Yeah.
right,
Amen.
right. That's your new shirt. Don't be a hater. Expect to see it next week.
Hatred sucks.
Yeah, let's do it.
You guys, thank you so much. I mean, I think, we could take 20, 30 more hours.
Right.
There's so much to talk about. But what's most important, I think, in this time is like what you're doing here. Listening, talking, sharing.
Amen.
There's validation, there's understanding. I mean, I've learned a lot just in this hour here or more.
Yeah.
Listening to you. And man, if that could be a model for all of us watching, whether it's a difficult family member, a boss that's just driving you crazy, a child that's bouncing off the wall, whatever it might be, to really, really listen, So thank you so much for tuning in to this podcast, and I'm going to pray for us, and we will sign off, get you guys back to work. So,
Thank you.
Lord, we thank you for Edward and Jim, and thank you for this conversation. And it does need to continue. There's a lot that we can be talking about and should be talking about, but I thank you for what this models, love for one another and listening, and that ultimately we're about the same things, which is loving one another. And so, God, I pray for every listener right now, everybody watching, that you've taken this time and taken what needs to be said and the encouragement to each heart listening right now. We pray for healing in our community, healing in our land, and only you can bring it, Lord. The issues are complex and very deep, so we trust you. In Jesus' name, amen.
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 Thanks, bro. Appreciate you having me.
Oh,
This guy's.
I'm kind of in a fist.
Oh, you're in a fist
Have
bump?
it.